All right, good. Hi, everyone. So we are about to get started with the question and answer session around the topic of getting home during the winter.
So I'm Annie, I'm the SU Education Officer, and we're here with Tom, who's SU Sports Officer. Just a quick disclaimer, we're in a bubble, which is why we're together. So we're here today to basically address the issue of the latest government guidance that's come out, saying that students in England are likely to be allocated departure dates during a student travel window between the 3rd and the 9th of December. During that time, students may have the opportunity to be tested, and if they produce 2 negative tests, then they will be able to travel home, essentially to minimise the spread of COVID-19. So the university has announced that they will be the government has announced that the universities will need to move teaching online from the 9th of December, and the University of Bath have recently updated their plans on testing, teaching and travel, which you can see on their website.
So just quickly to introduce some of the senior management team who have kindly volunteered their time to answer some of our questions. So we have Cassie Wilson, who is the VP of Student Experience. I'm not sure if Callie's going to move there. Yeah, we are going to move and wave. OK, amazing. Jane Loveys, the Director of AHS. Keith Zimmerman, who is our Chief Operating Officer. Stephen Badley, who is the Director of Sport, but is leading on the programme for the maths testing at Bath. And Peter Lambert, the Pro Vice Chancellor of Learning and Teaching. Thank you all to us. Well, thank you for making the time to address some of the concerns that we are hearing from our students, and thank you to our students who have joined us today to ask some questions. The feedback and the survey responses have been honestly incredible, and the hundreds of different perspectives reflected in your questions are influencing our own response as an SU and more widely as a university. So we've collated a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions to get through, but if there are any that come to you during this period, then there'll be the opportunity to use the Q&A function on here. So please like any questions that you'd like asked as well. So there's a like function, and kind of upvote any things that you'd like for us to ask, and we'll try and go with those. Finally, thank you to the incredible SU Voice team and the supporting staff who have turned around all of this feedback so quickly, so that we have some really good questions to grill our senior management team with. Yeah, we're going to get to as many questions as we possibly can within the allotted time. So we ask that we ask those answering the questions to keep the answers short. We'll divide the questions into a few different topics. Yeah, awesome. And Keith is going to start us off with some information around, what we know about testing at the moment.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom, and thanks to everybody in the SU for organizing this, and thanks to all of you for your patience and understanding for really this whole period. It's really been quite incredible, and I'm well aware of how much we all don't know still about what arrangements are in place. So we'll try and clarify what we can today, but we've got a lot more that we need to resolve and communicate to you as you go. But let me try and say a few words about what I understand about the government's mass testing program, how it relates to the travel of students home before the winter holiday, and what it means for us on an ongoing basis. So the university is rolling out a mass asymptomatic testing program using lateral flow tests, which provide for a very fast turnaround time. The thinking is that everyone should start being tested twice a week in order to contain infection and to help everyone to understand their own COVID status, if you will, so that they can make good choices. They're rolling it out in a big hurry to support the large movement of students over the December over that so-called student travel week. And so we're working hard, and Stephen and the team are putting in place a program open for mass testing from the 30th of November, and will run at a very large scale. We don't really know how many of you will choose to take part in this program, so we're going to have to make some big assumptions about that. But our hope is that everyone will try to take advantage of this opportunity in order to travel home in as safe a manner as possible. I want to emphasize this is a voluntary program. You're highly recommended by government to take advantage of it, but it is a voluntary program, and it is a medical procedure to which you need to consent. We will facilitate that because we think it's in the best interest of our students and the university and the wider public, but this is very much not a compulsory exercise. And similarly with the recommendation for the student travel window, this is also a strong recommendation that students, if they're able to, should travel in that period. But there is an understanding that this will not be possible for significant numbers, and the university will work to support students to travel in that window where they can, and we would encourage you to do so. But also, if you're not able to do so, we will continue to support all our students as best we can in the way that we have all term. So we are planning to have 2 test sites, one in Dartmouth Avenue and another on campus, and to have those open from the 30th of November right up until the 23rd of December, so that we can meet needs of students and staff who want to use the program. For the first 9 days of that program in the student travel window, we'll ask people to try not to use the program unless they need to. That is, if you're traveling in that period. But from the 9th of December, it should be available to all members of the university for the twice weekly testing program if you want to take advantage of it. I'm sure there'll be other questions, very happy to answer them, but I'll stop there and look forward to further. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Just to clarify on that point, and thank you for answering so many of the questions already, actually. So what happens if Bath isn't selected for this programme? If we're not selected, we will look to roll out our own mass testing program if we're able to do so, and we just don't know what the implications of that are, but we would not be in a position to do that in time for this travel window. We're quite confident of qualifying for the program, but we don't know yet, and won't know, I think, until the end of next week, whether we are or not. But as you will all know, we've seen quite a few positive cases here at Bath, so we're advocating very hard that we should qualify. Okay, fantastic, thank you.
Amazing, thank you. So our next question is going to be, as the university said that learning and teaching will be moved online from the 8th of December, students are asking, will the library and other facilities remain open on campus?
Shall I answer that one?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that's learning and teaching. It's a really good question. Whoever asked, yes, the answer is absolutely yes. So what the government has asked us to do, or told us to do, is to say that all face-to-face or in-person teaching must stop as from the early morning of the 3rd or late night of the 8th or the early morning of the 9th. There will be no face-to-face on the 9th. What we will be doing is continuing with IPT until then. Now, IPT is naturally staggered because most students will have one IPT, maybe sometimes two per week, so that it means that the week before will be somebody's last IPT session of the calendar year, and that they will then be able to make sure that they're tested and then go home. So there's a natural staggering. The only thing that will be stopping, in a sense, on the 9th is the IPT. Everything else should carry on in terms of access to library materials, the loyal sessions, the line on live interactive sessions, the lectures, and the recorded lectures. You will still be able to contact your personal tutor or your unit coordinator or your director of studies. It's not that the university is shutting down, it's simply that the government has said that face-to-face or in-person teaching should stop.
Thank you. So in response to that, if in-person teaching is stopping and moves online, how will the in-person activities work? Are done all online?
Another good question. Thank you for that. We're only talking about 3 days. We're only talking about Wednesday or the 10th or the 9th, 10th, 11th. And that is really down to departments to make sure that their students feel that they're supported. They might or might not go ahead. In some cases, they might well go ahead because it's absolutely important for the learning outcomes and for the academic standards. In other cases, the students might say, well, actually, there's no point in doing this. But we're only talking about 3 days. And it's important clarification because this is only to do with pre-Christmas. Once we're not talking about semester 2 at this stage. Semester 2, we would very much be hoping that IPT will be up and running again. This is simply to do with pre-Christmas arrangements at this stage.
Okay, so another question that's come through. I've already got flights home booked. How will all of this tie in? So that's probably for Keith on the transport side of things.
Yep, and my mantra here is going to be, you are highly recommended. If you are unable to do so, we fully understand and we believe government guidance is drafted in such a way as to allow for the students who are not able to travel inside that window to do what they need to do. So I don't see any reason why students should cancel a flight or any other arrangements. Best endeavors is what is expected of all of us.
Fantastic, thank you. The next question is around going home. So must we return to our home addresses or can we spend Christmas somewhere else?
Shall I keep taking these ones? That is entirely your choice. You need to pay attention to the existing government guidance that applies to all of us in terms of mixing of households and so on. And there may be other restrictions that are put in place locally again after this national lockdown period. So all of that applies, but neither the university nor any of the restrictions on the guidance that's recently been published for students would specifically prohibit anything like that.
Amazing, thank you. So obviously not all students will be leaving Bath, and so some students may not be able to return home as such for Christmas, or they may be staying in Bath. What's being organised at the uni for them over the Christmas period?
This is classy.
Do I need to wait for the oh, here we go. I'm like, thank you, Tom and Annie. So as in every normal year, we have a number of students that do stay in Bath and on campus over Christmas. This year we are expecting that to be more than normal, but we have a group working on a plan of activity for the Christmas period. So that was intended to be the 4 weeks from the 12th, the day after term was meant to end, until the end of revision week. Because students are potentially, hopefully leaving earlier than that within the travel window, we're bringing the schedule of activities forward a bit, and so this will start earlier than the 12th. So this is a schedule of social activities, various different types, and also online activities, in case the restrictions that are applied in the local area mean things have to stay online. But there will be a schedule of activities, and as soon as we have that, we will share that with you. That will also include being looked after in terms of food. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and Boxing Day, AHS will provide meals, and then all the other time the fresh shop will be open. We're open other than Christmas Day and Boxing Day, so people will be able to buy food, but we will also be making food available as well from one of the catering outlets. I think that covers everything. Oh, also wellbeing support will be provided through the whole of the Christmas period. There will be somebody available throughout the whole of the Christmas period.
And just to add on to that question there, what about those students that aren't on campus?
Okay, in terms of the wellbeing support, that will be the same for any student. All the activities will be for students on campus and off campus, so students will be able to come onto campus to take part in those activities. And I should say, these are some of them Christmas related activities for those that celebrate Christmas, and other are just general activities for those that may not be celebrating Christmas. The meals that will be provided over the Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and Boxing Day, that is for students on and off campus as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Cassie. What support will be available for those testing positive? Obviously, when we're increasing the number of tests happening, there might be an expectation of, increasing asymptomatic positives. So what support is going to be available, and do we have the kind of infrastructure to support that?
Sure, I can start the answer to that. So as is the case now, if a student tests positive, then they will receive support from either wellbeing in student services or the student living welfare and support team in AHS, and that will be the same. And whilst there may be more students testing positive because of the asymptomatic testing, we're not anticipating a lot more students will need that, will be testing. We're expecting lower numbers of students to still be here, so we're not expecting increased numbers of those testing positive, and so we have the infrastructure in place to provide that support. And the same will go for supporting students in self-isolation. Has been the case. The wonderful job that AHS have been doing in supporting students in self-isolation, that will continue.
Absolutely, thank you.
Amazing, thank you. So we've got a question from some doctoral students. It's due to the window that's been given for travel, can doctoral students be in Bath and continue their lab work for another 9 days until like the 18th of December before they go home for Christmas?
I'll go again. So it may have already been answered in terms of what Keith's already said about the testing. So as we say, government are strongly recommending that students travel in that window, and hence in-person teaching is stopping. But doctoral students are obviously different. They don't have the in-person teaching now. So if they need to or want to stay to carry on their work, then that's absolutely fine. And they will be able to be tested up until the 23rd of December before they leave. That is voluntary. They don't have to have that testing, but equally they are able to stay until when they want, or throughout the whole of the Christmas period, as some may do. And they are obviously included in all the activities and provision of food, etc., and support during the holiday period.
Thank you, Cassie. So we're on to accommodation now. So what would happen with our student housing rent if we're forced to go home early? Will there be any reimbursement in rent if we are required to leave early? Oh, I think that's Jane.
Okay, so if you are living in the private sector, the university has very little influence on private sector housing and the arrangements you have with the landlord. If you are in university accommodation, it isn't an extended period of being away from your accommodation. Your accommodation is still available. It's advisable that you leave and go home between the 3rd and 9th, but if you stay, your accommodation is there and will be supported. You can come back to your accommodation. So at the moment, it isn't the intention to refund accommodation because it is there. If we were in a completely different situation as we were before, we would review it. But as it stands at the moment, it is just about going home in a given period. But if you're not able to go home, as said before, you can travel later and you can come back when you want your accommodation. Your accommodation will be heated, serviced, cleaned throughout the whole period. So we are supporting accommodation through the whole of the period until semester 2.
Lovely.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Jane. So we've had some questions about returning to Bath after Christmas. See, the guidance at the moment has been about leaving Bath, but students are asking, will they need a negative test, or what will happen if they need to quarantine upon returning back to campus for semester 2?
Shall I take that again? So there's quite a bit we don't yet know about what the government's plans are for students returning to university after the Christmas vacation. But it is our expectation that where students need to quarantine, we will support them to do so. And we expect that there will be a continuation of the an extension of the mass testing program across the country in time to enable students to get the same kind of test in their home location or wherever they happen to be before they travel to Bath, and because we're asking people to do this weekly now, when they return to Bath, we very much hope that we will have a testing program in place here.
Fantastic. Just going to go to a few of the questions on the comment side of things, or the question and answer section. Remember, if you do have any questions, and if you're watching this and any haven't been answered, then please do pop them through. So will students who are in private rented accommodation be able to go home when they like, especially if they have not been on campus during the semester? Is there any way they could be stopped from going home outside the travel window? I believe that's already been answered though.
Yeah, I'll take that. Students are strongly recommended to and all students, wherever they're resident, to travel in that student travel window. That's the language the government's used. It is a recommendation. It has not been put into legislation. We have no interest in enforcing these recommendations, and we have no powers to do so.
Okay. Thanks, Keith. So this is probably one for Jane. Does the university have accommodation or services to support those who must self-isolate upon returning for semester 2?
Yeah, sure. So just as we welcomed 549 students now through a quarantine process when they arrived into the country, we still have that accommodation. So it is unlikely that we will have 549 students all in one go, because already we're having feedback from our questionnaire that says that some students are staying over Christmas, but there is still accommodation available. And if you need to quarantine in separate accommodation, we will have exactly the same system. You will book it in through AHS. So whether you're in the city or whether you live on campus, we will have separate accommodation, and we will feed you as we did before and look after you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Okay. One of the questions that we're getting in is about the testing procedure, and students are asking, are they able to book the testing slot themselves, or would they be given a slot?
Stephen, do you want to take that?
Very, very happy to. There will be a booking system, and students will be able to book their own slot for their 2 tests. They should take 2 tests 3 days apart, or 2 full days in between, so day 1 and day 4. And there'll be a booking system up and ready over the next couple of weeks to enable that.
Thank you very much, Stephen. The next question is, if others in my household test positive, but I don't, do I need to leave?
It depends what you mean by don't. If students in your house, if people in your household test positive and you test negative, you should travel immediately. So test and go is you're going to start to see this. If you have not had a test though, then you would be considered a close contact and should isolate until you have completed 14 days isolation or have had a negative test. So go get a test.
Sticking on the testing topic, what's the timescale of the results at the moment for the test?
Within 24 hours, and in quotes, normally much quicker.
Excellent, thank you.
Cheers, Keith. So, Peter, there have been some questions about deadlines and exams during the moving periods. How will those be addressed? Oh, I think you're muted, Peter. It had to happen at one point.
It had to be me as well, didn't it? Thank you, Tom. No, that's a very good question, and it is something that we're looking at. Obviously, the guidelines from the government have only just come through, so we are in contact with individual departments because this is all done at a departmental level or at a programme level, so it needs to be addressed at that level. There may be some tests during that period. We've heard there might be some live tests, and there might be some course deadlines. We're working with directors of studies to ensure either the tests are moved or deadlines are extended, but they will be in contact with students to make sure that no students are disadvantaged by this.
Amazing, thank you. And so for some students, they're saying that their home environment isn't necessarily appropriate for them to be studying in. What advice would you give to those students? So what happens if their home environment is not appropriate for them to study?
Well, they can always remain on campus if they don't want to. They can return to campus. They need to, we would hope that they would be able to find the most conducive environment for studying as they can. If they are having difficulties, then we'd recommend they talk to their either to their director of studies or personal tutor. But certainly, as has been said, many students we expect will decide to stay on campus for an extended period because that might be more conducive to their studies. We're not kicking students out. I think that needs to be made very clear.
Thank you. We've just got one that should be a simple answer, but we've had come through saying IPT ending on the 8th, 9th, depending. Could you just confirm that this is the date that it was planning to end for students?
Yeah, sorry, I did say that earlier, maybe not clearly enough. It stops. There is no IPT on the 9th or the 10th or the 11th, but there will, fingers crossed, everything going well, as far as we can, we are saying that IPT will be there in semester 2. In some departments, there might even be some live stuff going on in revision week. That all depends on what the current practice is. But certainly for semester 2, we are preparing and expecting IPT. Is that right? Is that clear enough?
So the next question was around, I guess, the more extracurricular activities, but for the period in between the end of lockdown and the 9th of December, can things go back to normal? In the sense that, and someone who is obviously after my own heart there, can sport resume and are sports allowed to start up again? Who'd like to answer?
You want me to take that one, Keith? Was it a question, Tom, whether sports clubs could start up again? Did you say?
It was can things go back to normal in the sense that are sports allowed to start up again? I mean, you can put, yeah, it's fairly nuanced, I guess. But
it's not quite clear what will be able to happen at the moment. There's a directive or guidance come out to say that extracurricular activities shouldn't be encouraged. We need to work our way through that. We're talking to other universities. I would certainly hope that and expect the students will be able to exercise. And it's a question of us working out what the definition of exercise is. But I think it's incredibly important that after 4 weeks of lockdown, that students are able to get out, be active, both in the sports training village, on the playing fields, and we just need to work our way through the guidance. But that's a general feeling also across the university sector. So I'm afraid I can't give a definitive answer to that yet, but we know what we want to achieve.
Thank you, Stephen.
Peter, this is another question for you about learning and teaching. So we've had some questions that came through with the survey that we ran about how effective is purely online teaching and concerns around academic standards. Students are worried that not having in-person tutorials will have a negative effect on their studies with things just being online. What reassurance?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I do understand the concern. I'll just say a couple of things. First of all, as I've said, we will be trying to run IPT next semester, and we certainly intend to do so because we understand that students find it very valuable. Those students that do find it valuable and are attending are giving very good feedback on it, and I do understand that. What we've been trying to do from the outset is to also ensure that the live online interactive lectures and the other materials online are as good as they possibly can be. And we've had very good feedback on the live online interactive. But to reassure students, certainly those of you who are studying last year will remember that we did have to go completely online on the 23rd of March. And a lot of students at that stage were very worried about academic standards and learning outcomes and whether they'd be able to fulfill their potential. All of the analysis of results has pointed that students excelled in the exams, that they did fulfill their potential. There were the fewer number of appeals, of complaints. Generally, students did extremely well. And that's not just the quality of teaching, but it was also the resources that were available and the support that was available to them. So I do understand that students, of course, they want to have face-to-face contact, but they should rest assured that we've got the support mechanisms in place that they will be able to fulfill their potential come the exams. And we are there, whatever people might think, directors of studies and personal tutors, and throughout the organisation, people are there to support students, not to catch them out. So if students need extra support, it should be available.
Thank you, Peter. So Jane, we've got a question for you. As someone with specific dietary requirements, I'm concerned that if I need to quarantine, specific foods will not be provided to me. Is there any way of ensuring I can get specific foods if I need to isolate?
I hope we managed to support people before that were in quarantine. But yes, if there are specific foods, then we will cater for specific diets. We did cater for a whole range. So as long as we know beforehand, before the student comes back, when they book their accommodation, quarantine accommodation, we ask, are there any dietary requirements? And that's what we need to know. And yes, we will cater for specifics.
Lovely, thank you, Jane. So Keith, you briefly touched earlier on where some of the test centres may be located in some of those plans, but there are concerns of like how will these be managed? So like getting students to these places, the queuing systems, how will that all be managed? Might be you or Stephen, not sure.
Stephen, want to take that?
Yes, as I said before, there'll be a booking system, so students will book a timed slot. We're looking at the venue on campus, probably the Edge, and we're looking at Dartmouth Avenue. So two venues, students will be able to go on the booking system, choose a venue, choose a time slot, booking 2 tests, in fact, on the booking system, and then turn up around that time slot. We don't, clearly there'll be a degree of queuing, but I mean, we will make sure that that's kept to the minimum. Nobody wants large queues of people, and it will be well organised and well managed. So it should be fairly straightforward. It's a big exercise, but with everyone's cooperation, I think it will go smoothly. And the key is for students just to go online as soon as we can get that booking system up and running, which is being developed at the moment, and then it'll be a simple process of logging on.
Is there any support for students if they need to get there with transport? Has the university got anything in place for transport?
I'm talking to Tom Britton about any additional transport arrangements that may be required. At the moment, we're not envisaging that will be, but we're looking as we develop our plans. I mean, clearly there's the normal transport systems up to the university, which will be functioning. And then Dartmouth Avenue is, I know, not close to everybody, but is close to a large number of the students who are living in town. So, and very, very walkable from all the accommodation around the Moorland Road area. And I say, then there's the normal transport systems up to the university. So I think we'll look at it. If we need to do anything extra, we'll do that. But I don't envisage that at the moment.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, there are, obviously, you've said there are 2 tests that you need to be taking. So when planning for, taking transport, at what times do those tests need to be taken before? So what window does that allow you with your transport?
Okay, if you're planning to go home on a Friday, you should be looking to do 2 tests 3 days apart. So you should book a test on the Monday, the Thursday, and then you can leave on the Friday.
Okay, fantastic.
Quite a simple question, hopefully. Students are asking, do they need to pay for the tests?
No.
Simple answer, we love it. We're just going through some of the ones that have been sent in at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you for sending all of them through, by the way, everyone. It's good to have some extra questions going through. Can we dictate when we'll leave in the travel window? So someone who may not have come in just now. Some of us have Christmas period jobs we need to be home for. Should be, yeah, that's a simple yes.
Oh, that's why I'm going off. When should we look to book our flights back to Bath? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, we're all looking at each other. That's a tough question. I think we have to rely on people to look at the best information that we've got at the time you need to make a booking. We hope to be as open and welcoming to students as we possibly can from the moment we start up again in January. So we'll be ready for you when you come. The only restrictions on that are the travel restrictions that might be in place either in wherever you're starting from or in Bath when you arrive. We will do our best to keep our FAQs up to date and other communications in place.
Fantastic. Cassie.
I was just going to add that semester 2 starts on the 1st of February, so we would expect everyone to be back by then if they are coming back to study in person, but I completely agree with everything Keith has said.
Is that hand as well?
Yeah, it's good. May I just come in on that as well? It was just to say, I did see a question from a student that said, are all exams online? And this is really important. Students, of course, all exams are online. So as Cassie said, the date where students need to be back, if they are going to continue, then it is by the 1st of February when the 2nd semester starts. They may choose to come back before then, of course, but that is the date that they need to be back for.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we've got a question. So someone who's currently in Germany, so not in a country on the corridor list, and has to return to Bath to empty their flat before Christmas. Can I take the test offered by the university during the quarantine period? And if negative, leave immediately to return home? Or do I have to respect the 14 days before I can organise my departure?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that one. It feels risky but it's a very good question, and I'd like to take that away and talk to public health colleagues. I don't think published guidance currently covers that question. It's a good one.
Yeah, thank you for that. So if Bath isn't selected for this national programme, when do you anticipate the uni's equivalent to be up and running? And you mentioned before that the travel window isn't feasible.
I would expect that to be next year in time for the start of our 2nd semester. That would be our ambition.
Amazing, thank you. So this is just for clarification that international students are still eligible for the testing and that they don't necessarily have to move flights that they already have booked. Can that be confirmed?
Yes, it can.
Lovely, thank you. And so there is concerns from students that this is going to be policed, and if they get a negative test and they don't leave, that suddenly they may be forced to go. I don't know who wants to respond to that statement.
I'll take it, because I really understand this concern, and government language and particularly media reporting has not been helpful. I'll repeat what I said previously. We strongly encourage you to take advantage of this program where you're able to do so, and to travel in the student travel window if at all possible for you. Please do take advantage of the test, but we have no power to enforce these provisions, and we have no interest in doing so. We want, as we've tried to do all along, to treat our entire community as sensible adults who will do their very best to follow the guidance with their best endeavours in using common sense.
Can I just add that our job is to facilitate you taking the test, should you wish to. The result of the test is communicated to you. It's between you and Test and Trace, or the NHS. We're not party to that information directly. We of course ask you to report positive cases to us, but that's exactly the same at the moment. It's your test and it's your relationship with NHS.
Fantastic, thank you, Stephen. So there's a question coming in from some of our international students. Can we stay in university accommodation to quarantine if coming back from a restricted country?
Okay, so if you were to be joining a household where others weren't in quarantine, then you would need to be in alternative accommodation, because it would be difficult to manage that household. If you come back to your household and you are the only one in the household, then there is no need to have alternative accommodation. But what we can't do is mix those that need to quarantine with those that don't need to quarantine, because it would put everybody into a quarantine situation. So therefore we would offer alternative accommodation on campus, as we did when students first arrived.
Fantastic, thank you, Jane. And just for the benefit of those who might not be live with us and able to see the comments, do we have to clear our rooms for the Christmas holidays? No,
you don't have to clear your room for the Christmas holidays, but it'd be good if you could tidy the kitchen a bit before you went. But joking aside, we just asked for a bit of tidiness before you leave, but no need to clear your kitchens out, or your bedrooms. It is your accommodation and it stays just as it is. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane.
So got a question now about students that are on placement. So will placement students be included in the testing if living in Bath and planning to travel home?
I can take that one, Annie. Yes, if a student is on placement and they're in Bath, of course they can come up for testing. They're absolutely welcome to do so, but we would caveat that with if they are living in Bath. We don't want students travelling across the country, of course, that's counterintuitive. So students living in Bath. The second part of the question, Annie, was? I
think that was the whole question.
What was that?
That was the whole thing.
That's the whole thing. Of course, if they are on placement, then they will need to be talking to their placement providers about when they can go home. The government has asked for students consider going home between that, or they strongly advise students to go between in that period. But if a student is on placement, then they're on a different, to do with the provisions of employment, that is need to be negotiated with their placement providers. They can't just, but please ask them not to simply say to their placement provider, I'm off. And they need to come to a separate arrangement.
Fantastic, thank you, Peter. I believe this is probably one for Stephen. Could you please explain a bit more about the 3 days apart for testing? So can you continue life as normal during those 3 days?
Yes, assuming you get a negative result from the first test, then you continue as normal, take your second test, and then the guidance is that you should leave campus as soon as possible after that, or your accommodation in town, and return home, because you've got 2 confirmations, 2 negative tests that you really are not carrying the virus and you're not infectious. So that's rationale for it. And yes, you can carry on as normal. Obviously, if you get a positive test, you'll then again NHS contact you or Test and Trace contact you to say you've got a positive test. You will then be asked to take an additional PCR test, the normal one that you take at the moment if you've got symptoms, and that will just confirm whether it was a positive, which it will be, I'm afraid, in most cases, or whether it's a false positive, which can happen. So it would only be if you get a positive test that you need to modify your behaviour, you'd be restricted.
Thank you, Stephen.
Peter, it's another question about academic quality. So obviously with the disruptions that have happened this year and that we saw towards the end of last year, how will the cohorts be compared from this year's cohort to a non-COVID cohort? You're on mute again.
Mute again.
Quickly, there we go. I'm beginning to wonder when we'll get back to this idea of what is a normal cohort, because every cohort faces its own challenges, or certainly have over the last few years. But I think this was a question that really came to the fore last semester, when students were saying, well, no one has ever been in our situation. How will you measure our experience against the experience of previous students? And I think it's a misunderstanding of the way that we mark, the way that we assess, and how we take into context, how we take the work into context. We do have to make sure that academic standards are met and that they're consistent, but it isn't simply measuring a student from this year against a student from next year. And as I'll say, despite all the difficulties that students faced last semester, semester 2 of 2020, the results were outstanding, academic standards were met, and all the learning outcomes were met as well. So I don't think students should be particularly worried about how they compare with students in the past. It's to do the best they can in the current circumstances. And that's meant to be reassuring. I hope that's reassuring.
Lovely, thank you. So this is, I'm not sure if it would be Keith or Stephen, one of you can answer, but where has this all come from, essentially, to give students the context of where this whole situation has emerged from?
Can you help me with what we might mean by the whole? I mean, back to March. Is this about the get everyone home for Christmas issue? Yeah. Well, this is just politics. Not just politics. This is higher education and very sadly students caught up in political and media debates. There is not a lot of common sense in the way that I think a lot of these proposals have been developed. There's been very little consultation with universities and those of us who understand how we work and what the constraints might be. But those complaints aside, the government is trying to get everybody home safely and in a way that does avoid the significant spike in positive cases that we saw all across the country, much worse in other places than in Bath. And so that can be avoided in the first instance on the way home, as if you will, and I know this only applies to a certain number of students, and on the way back. In the background is the rollout of this mass asymptomatic testing program, as I say, in a way that we hope will persist until this pandemic is over. That is a very positive development and one that we've been looking forward to for some time. We think it short of a vaccine, it will make a difference to what it feels like to live and work at the university in the future. This will significantly reduce unnecessary isolations and will shorten isolations in other cases. And the fact that people will more readily know when they're positive and then can isolate will also then reduce the incidence. So in those three different ways, this is a very positive development for us, and I hope will significantly change what next semester will feel like to live and work and study in Bath.
Fantastic, thank you, Keith. Okay, so our next question was around, this semester has really been quite heavily impacted, and I guess there's probably one for Peter. This semester has been, really quite heavily impacted. Some courses more than others. Can students expect partial or full reimbursements of tuition fees? And obviously this is a sector-wide problem. Yeah.
I thought your question was going to be, can students expect no detriment and safety nets and IMCs and all the rest of it? And of course, we're considering all of that to support students. In terms of reimbursement, no, I think this is across the sector. The sector has invested enormously in providing online resources and better online learning and teaching. And I think that's true of nearly all universities. Here at Bath, we have invested more than I can recall in all my time at the university in systems and resources to support students in learning and teaching. So I don't think any university could afford to do it, and I don't think universities should, because the staff are probably working as hard as they've ever worked in terms of learning and teaching, not only providing online lectures, but also live online interactive, and also the IPT. So I do understand from a student perspective that you could say it's not quite the same as we hoped it would be, and I think we can all understand that. But in terms of the resources that have been invested, I cannot see it as conceivable across the sector that a university would be able to, or would feel it was right to reimburse.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. This is another question back at Peter again, about IPT, and will it resume in January, and what should students expect? Will it be the same as this semester with the 4 hours?
It will resume in February because that's when the semester starts. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. It will resume. It might or might not be exactly the same, because one of the things that we've trying to do this semester is look at the lessons we've learned. Everybody will understand that IPT in the system, in the format that it has taken, is something that's new for staff and it's new for students. And I think both staff and students have made a real effort. But of course, there are ways that we can improve it. So departments are being encouraged to look at the way that they've done it, talk to their students, find out what has been particularly successful and what might not have been quite so successful, and tweak IPT to make it more responsive to what students want and what they feel they need going forward into semester 2. So yes, it will still be there. There will still be the 4 hours, but it might be used in slightly different ways, which will be better ways than they were used this semester, we'd hope, across the board.
Thanks, Peter. This time we got one for Stephen. So is the test the same kind of swab test as usual, or is it a different style?
No, it's a swab test where you insert a swab down the back of your throat, twiddle it around your tonsils, take it out, do similarly up both nostrils, and then you've collected the mucus that then gets tested. So it is a standard swab test. I think I'm told it's not the most pleasant thing, but it's something that people will be reasonably familiar with. I'll stop there with the dog barking. Excuse apologies.
No worries, no worries.
Lovely, that was not expected.
Yeah.
It was great
Some
addition.
wholesome dog action.
So we're now going to move on to, again, back to doctoral students. So we've got a question that's come through. So what do the guidelines mean for doctoral students, and are they treated the same as undergraduates in this situation?
I'm happy to take that, and I would refer people, and I'll put it in response to one of the questions. There's some useful guidance from the Office for Students on this, and I'll simply read what it says. Research students will be able to continue in-person research activities if the research cannot reasonably be conducted from home. Where possible, research should be carried out at home or without gathering with others. But as I said previously, we will be open for all graduate students right up until the university closure period. So these provisions do not apply, and our reading is that research students are much more analogous to employees of the university, and we would encourage you to follow guidance in those lines. Please, as staff are encouraged to do so, you too are encouraged to take advantage of the testing program, but the student travel window does not apply to graduate students.
Fantastic, thank you, Keith.
Peter, it's another one for you. You briefly just mentioned no detriment and safety nets, and so we had a question that come through that says, can we get some clarification / insight onto current plans around safety nets and no detriment policies?
Yeah, and I did kind of mention it on purpose because I think a lot of students are thinking about that. I think the first thing to say is that this is a movable feast. That we're watching as things develop, and of course we can't predict what will happen in the next in semester 2, but we are watching, and we will. The way that we're approaching is that we will be as supportive to students as we can be in the circumstances. So at the moment, we're certainly looking at lessons learned, and we're trying to get greater flexibility across things such as extensions, things such as IMCs, things such as deferrals, within a kind of a no detriment approach. It's not the same as it was last semester. They're not the same measures because it's not the same circumstances, but we are looking for greater flexibility in terms of a number of things such as extensions and IMCs. We're asking departments, for example, to be far more flexible on things like asking for evidence. We certainly don't want students running down to the health centre to get a doctor's note at this stage. I think the NHS is busy enough as it is. So we will be giving the details of this. Any changes that we make have to go through Senate, and Senate is next week. So once we've got these approved, we will be writing to students to let them know about what measures we have at the moment, but it's with the understanding that we might want to extend these measures should the situation get any worse. There you go. But I'd also add to students that I'm in constant contact with Annie, who is very much pushing for student interests on all areas of no detriment.
Okay, all right, thank you everyone. Now we will wrap it up there. So thank you again to Keith, Stephen, Jane, Cassie and Peter, who have joined us for this Q&A. It is, it's great to have these questions raised and answered in a format like this. Hope that those that have been watching have found it useful. The form that we sent out over the last few days is still open. So if you do have any further questions, please do ask them, and we can raise them in the relevant meetings. All of these insights and all of the nuances here are really, really important. So please do make sure that your voice is heard. Recording and notes of the meeting will also be made available after this meeting. So if you do want to rewatch, if you have missed part of it, then we will look to get that over to you as soon as we can. And
just one final thing, so if you have any additional questions, don't forget you can reach out to the SU officers, to student services, to SU advice and support, and to your director studies, personal tutors. They're all there at the moment to support you, so don't be afraid to be asking them questions, and reach out if you do need that support. But thank you very much for everybody. It's been really useful. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll wave.
Thank you.